This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Welcome everybody. This is the Easthampton City Council Public Safety Committee. It is 6 p.m. on October 3rd, 2023. Welcome to our members, Councilor Derby, and I believe temporarily, or Councilor Gomez will be sitting in for now for Councilor Munier, and welcome as always to our colleague Councilor Denham for sitting on this meeting, and we have Fire Chief here. So we do have some minutes from, just switching screens here, from September 5th and 7/11, better known as July 11th, 2023. I've reviewed them. I don't have any issues.
I have no issues.
Okay, I'll take a motion to approve both of those.
So moved.
Okay.
I can take it, but I'm not voting for it.
Okay. Let me just, I'm also taking notes. All right, all in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Abstention. All right, minutes are approved. Okay, next on our agenda is public speak, I believe. If there's anyone here who would like to speak about an item that is not otherwise on the agenda, we will always open up public speak opportunities for individual agenda items as we arrive to them. So if there's anyone here who would like to speak about anything, hi.
Hello.
What are you looking for? Planning?
Planning.
One more floor.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any item that's not otherwise on the agenda? Anyone? All right, so moving on, as was started by the previous chair, thank you. We have quarterly reports or semi-quarterly reports from, or reports from public safety departments, and Chief Norris is here today to update us. So take it away, Chief.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules for being here. Again, we've always tried to make it one of our initiatives to keep everyone in the loop on the ongoings of the fire department and EMS organization here in Easthampton, and wanted tonight to take the opportunity to walk you through some of the current ongoings and initiatives at the department. Everyone should have an agenda before you. I'll kind of walk through you going through that right now. Starting with tomorrow night, we have 2 new firefighters that are being sworn in for the City Council. One of those firefighters started about 3 weeks ago, and the other one started just last week. So we're excited to bring them onto our organization. Certainly, as I believe all of you are aware, the City Councilors have taken an active role in the hiring process for the last 3 years now, having a representative on the panel for hiring, and certainly we've kind of transitioned now to ensure that as they're brought forward, making sure they're sworn in for the City Council, with the mayor doing that swearing in to kind of close out that hiring process. With those 2 new employees being sworn in tomorrow night, that will leave us with 1 vacancy. That vacancy actually, when we were bringing these other 2 forward, one of the firefighters, right after we offered that individual the job, actually backed out because he was offered a job in Wilbraham, and he lives in that community and has family members working in that community. So that kind of set us back because we had gone through hiring for civil servants. It's a lengthy process. So that did kind of set us back a little bit more, knowing that we offered him the job and at the last minute. But it is what it is, and we're working with civil service now to fill that one. So once we get that vacancy filled, that will bring us up to par levels where we're supposed to be. So that's kind of an update on hiring, and you'll see 2 of those tomorrow night. Currently, family medical leave. We have 4 out right now in family medical leave, and 1 more going out in about 3 to 4 weeks. All of them are paternity leave. So typically we're seeing that leave for those types of leave are anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. So certainly we're doing the best we can to manage that and balance the groups out. In addition to that, we recently had 2 out that were out long-term on IOD, injured on duty. But both of them are back now. Both of them are healthy. Both of them got cleared medically, and both of them are back on shift now. So And then certainly, you know, I cringe a little bit when I say it, but certainly it's the reality we're facing out there is COVID. We have we have 2 firefighters out right now. Basically, we're going by the state guidance through DPH, which is basically saying they have to stay, I'm gonna say quarantine, but basically away for 5 days. And then if they're asymptomatic at that point, they can come back with a mask on for another 5 days. And certainly, given the nature of our business, that having 2 people out thus far isn't actually that bad, because we're certainly seeing an uptick over the last 60 days throughout the community and the region, transporting people with more symptoms. And when you put firefighter paramedics in the back of a 6x6 closed container, even with all the best protective measures and ventilations, there's still a heightened potential that they're going to eventually have something happen. So we're managing that right now also. So given kind of some of those right now, the 2 new hires that are being sworn in tomorrow night, I initially was going to send them to the Recruit Training Academy starting the first week in November, which is down in Springfield. That's a 10-week long academy. I'm going to hold off on sending them because if I don't want to lose 2 more, which would then increase over time that much more. So I've already spoken to the academy. I'm going to hold off on them and hold off until January. Wait till we get some people back from family medical leave, hopefully get people through some COVID and not have as many people out when I send them. So that's the plan right now for sending them to the academy. It will not be November, but now January instead. We're also using our training captain. Captain Sandy Kraus is in training, so we've been using her to the best of our abilities also. Anytime there's a captain out on shift. Right now, as I mentioned, we have one of the new firefighters going through orientation, so for the next 2 weeks she can't cover shift. But outside of that, we've been using her to cover shift as well, to again help kind of manage and keep control of some of the overtime. So the last one there is one new hire backed out the week we were going to hire him, went to Wilbraham, so that kind of closes out some of the updates on personnel over at Fire and EMS.
Any questions about that section? So Chief, when you swear in the firefighters, and if they're holding off on academy till January, what are they not able to do without the academy training?
Nothing. We'll still be able to use them. So essentially, when these new personnel are brought on, we put them through a 14-day in-house orientation. So they're going to learn the basics of firefighting, fire suppression techniques. One of them is already a paramedic, and then one of them is a basic EMT that will be going to paramedic school. So to answer your question, both of them can immediately be used on the ambulance, and both of them can be used on shift for firefighting suppression as well. Certainly when they go to the academy, they get a higher level and more kind of in-depth level of training, but they certainly can and will be used on shift until they go in January.
Great. Anything else in that section, anyone? All right, moving right along.
So budgets and grants. So we're monitoring the overtime, we're adjusting times for the academy, we're using the training captain for coverage. We'll continue to monitor that as we always do each year. Some good news, FY23 EMS revenue. So I ran the numbers, I gave you all a chart, and it's just interesting to look back. Last fiscal year, we closed out on June 30th for our EMS revenue of over $1.4 million. And when you look back just, about 3 years ago, we basically have doubled the revenue that the city was collecting, which was a pretty constant trend going back the last 10 years prior to that, to 2010. And just making some in-house administrative adjustments, some of the ways that we process calls, organizing some of the workflows. And then it's also a contributing factor is it certainly is a reflection of the increase in call volume. And I've talked to people about that, and not only the increase in call volume, but also the increase in severity. And the reality is the way that reimbursements occur, organizations are able to recoup at a higher level when you do more advanced procedures. So if you use a cardiac monitor, if you start an IV, compared to if you're just using an ice pack or something of that nature. So when people ask about, what was the reason, what's the cause, it's certainly a combination of all of those things. And it can't go unnoticed that it also is a reflection of that call and the severity of the calls. So that's just yours, just to kind of give you that visual depiction of revenue coming in to the general fund for the city.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Do you have to show? You might have said this, but I'm just trying to understand a little bit. Do you have to show proof of rationale of why you use this or that? And I'm thinking of that just because and I'm not saying that you do this. I know people look for, if we do X, then we get more money, so we're going to do this, and particularly in the medical field. And I don't think that you're doing this, but my question then is, do you have to show proof of that? And because that adds more administrative work.
Correct. So to answer your questions, around 75% of the calls in Easthampton, when you look at our payer mix here in the community, about 75% is Medicare, Medicaid. The other 25% is your private insurance. All of those calls that we submit to Medicare, Medicaid, as well as the other ones, but more the federally reimbursed ones, they get looked at in detail on a regular basis from the federal side. So they'll come in, they'll audit it. We also have a third-party billing company as an outside view. So they'll call us at times and be like, hey, why was this procedure done? If it's not explained clearly in the narrative. Every report we do, every call we do has to have a detailed report and a narrative with everything we did, why we did it, and the therapies performed. So it does get an outside look at it, especially given the higher percentage of Medicare, Medicaid that this community has. And then right now, to kind of springboard off of that question and follow-up is, every community in Massachusetts has the ability to enroll in the CPE program through Medicare. And essentially that CPE program allows communities to basically go through an application process, show the details as to what we billed, what we actually collected. Medicare then looks at it and says, you know what, we know we didn't reimburse you probably as much as we should have. So they then go and make an adjustment, and the city gets that money in June. So to give you a for example, this past June, we got $160,000 extra because of that CPE program. I'm in the process of doing it for last fiscal year. That's due October 15th. I have to have that in by. So I always plan on around $150,000 to $175,000 from those adjusted revenues for Medicare. But yeah, so it's very detailed
I can imagine.
from many outside factors.
It also just seems like it adds a lot of, one, you have to be careful about what you write
Absolutely.
in detail, which adds time to process, but also just the administrative kind of additional work of making sure all your T's are crossed.
It is. It's a lengthy process, and I've tried to continually educate to the best of my abilities over the years. The example I give is go to Bay State. When you go to Bay State, there's a reason you're going there, mostly because it's probably something to do with the cardiac cath lab, a trauma center, or something pediatric related, or the severity of the call. So by the time we go to the incident, do our treatment on scene, transport to Bay State, and then do a more detailed report that has to be left at the hospital for that continuity of care, I tell people, when you look at our numbers, they're gone anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours because of the report and the documentation the care required. When we go to Cooley Dickinson Hospital or Holyoke Hospital, those are more in our service zone. They're they're lower acuity calls where it's not as detailed, and they can kind of turn around and get in service quicker. But report writing and documentation is a huge component for these paramedics for a number of reasons.
Is your, I've never asked you about this before, so is your documentation paper, do you have like an EMR?
It's all electronic, we have an EMR system. And you have to, nowadays, it's required because everything gets immediately uploaded to the state. So talking about additional oversights, it goes to the state, and there's a statewide database, it's called Matrix. And every year they'll do quarterly reports in terms of how much Narcan did this region of the state use, how many IVs were started, So that gets uploaded to the state database as well.
Mhm.
So everything is electronic, both on our fire reports and on our EMS reports. So yeah.
Any other questions on that? Okay.
So let's switch gears from here, from revenue. Let's talk about some grants. We've been pretty lucky this past year in particular. A little over a week ago, we were awarded a staffing grant in the amount of $1.5 million to hire 4 additional personnel.
Mhm.
So that SAFER grant is a 3-year grant. It pays the full salaries and full benefits for those 4 positions for all 3 years.
Mhm.
What those 4 positions will do will allow our shifts that are currently, the 4 shifts currently have 7 people on the shift, and they'll drop down to as low as 5. What that will allow us to do is put 1 additional person on each group, so we'll go to 8 people per shift. We can go to our minimum of 6 now. By having 6 people on duty at a minimum all the time, now with the 3 ambulances, we can staff the 3 ambulances, and then more importantly, have them cross-staff the engine as well as needed. Typically what you're seeing is, I talk about concurrent calls a lot. We have concurrent calls anywhere from 35 to 40% of the time. So right now, if we only have if we have 5 people on duty for today, if I have 2 ambulances go out, that only leaves me 1 person back at the station. So now either I can't staff that ambulance, I have to call mutual aid in, and they go in a pickup truck, and now we lose that revenue because we can't transport and the other mutual aid company does. Or if a fire call comes in, now I'm sending 1 person and a fire apparatus. That's not a safe procedure, having them show up by themselves.
Mhm.
So it's pretty significant to get these 4 positions, have them paid for salaries and benefits for 3 years. And then just as a side note, the mayor and I have had in-depth conversations, and we're very conscious of the fact that it's great to get these grants, but also we need to plan collectively in terms of sustainability. And that plan in place is when we look at these EMS revenues, the last time that these rates were adjusted were the fall of 2021. My practice is always, in terms of that industry best practices, you always want to look at and readjust your rates about once every 2 years. We're going to do that this year. I'm purposely not going to touch those rates now. I'm going to wait until this grant ends, about 3 months before this grant ends. And then I'll work with the city administration. We'll adjust those rates, which will be a 5-year span at that point. That way that difference over that 5 years in terms of billing, in terms of the increased call volume over the 3 years, will make up that difference without touching the tax base. So that's kind of just so if you get questions, and please, I'm happy to talk to people about it, but that it's an important component that communities need to plan and at least have at least some sense in mind about how they're going to sustain these positions going forward. So.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Mhm.
When will they be hired?
So we're a civil service organization, civil service department, so we hire off a statewide civil service list. That list right now is dwindled down quite a bit. My initial thought right now is the exam is going to be given the week of October 14th for this year. That list should be certified end of February, early March. So I'm probably going to wait until around that time to hire those 4 people off of a full list of candidates.
And does that impact your grant timeline in terms of?
They give you a 6-month window to hire, so it's going to be right on the cusp of that deadline. So I might miss out on 2 or 3 weeks of funding in the overall picture. But I think in my experience, what I share with people is we have really tried as an organization to put more time and effort into hiring, knowing that these people are going to be city employees for 30 years compared to trying to rush it along. Then you may get employees that maybe aren't the best fit. So I think we're going to put more time and effort into trying to get the right people. And if that means it takes a couple more weeks, I think it's the long term, the right thing to do for the community.
And just one last question. It's a grant, but they'll still be union?
Yes, they'll be part of the local 1876 Union Gate. So we're excited about that grant. So we're working, continually working with the mayor and her financial team as well as the union to move that one along. About a month ago, we received another grant in the amount of $565,000. And that one there is for a new brush truck and also replacement of all the SCBAs, the self-contained breathing apparatus. Those units are 15 years old, which is the maximum lifespan. So if we didn't hit that grant, we would have been looking at capital funding to replace that. And the brush truck over there, it's a 1985, and it's actually a converted vehicle that was given to the city from the Department of Conservation and Recreation. And don't get me wrong, it should be duly noted that that vehicle was repurposed, and it served a very good purpose to the community. And we had always said that if we weren't successful in getting that grant for the brush truck, we were just gonna kind of clean it up and try again. We do probably on average 12 to 15 responses a year for brush fires. It's not a large, but we have a lot of potential. But we certainly didn't want to go before the city to ask for $350,000 for a vehicle to be used 15 times a year. So we did very well in that. So that will be ordered probably early spring.
And what's happening to the truck?
That will be given back to the Department of Conservation and Recreation as part of the agreement. When they gave it to us, we'll give it right back to them, and they'll probably just
Right back to them.
Exactly. The next one is the LED sign. So we got this grant back late spring, early summer. I've been kind of waiting to see where this one lied, and it should be good. I believe all the city ordinances are maybe still making their way through to finalize.
The city has a municipal exemption, so
Okay.
but it's still
This one here we're looking at is about 3 feet tall by 7 feet wide.
you're exempt.
Yes.
So, and the goal is to have it it'll be out by the bike path. It's on the main route of travel. We can use it for getting information out to the community, fire prevention, public safety messages. It really should work out very well.
Nice.
Yeah, so that should be nice. We received a regional grant for $220,000 for paramedic and EMT training. One of our newer members, Riley Sorensen, he is currently going to paramedic school at Greenfield Community College, basically almost for free because of this. We applied for the grant as a regional host. There's 8 other communities that are on this grant with us, and basically it's a 10% match. And one thing I just want to make clear is with those other communities, when those other communities send their people to this training, those other communities pay their 10% match. It's not Easthampton's 10% for everyone. We're paying the 10% for Riley, and that's it.
What's the cost per paramedic?
Right now, on average, it's around $12,000 to $13,000 for a paramedic program, and then a basic EMT is around $1,800. So when we wrote the grant, we wrote it to get 10 paramedics trained in the region and 60 EMTs. And again, when you look at Easthampton really taking a stance as that regional leader, when these other communities get their personnel trained, we also reap that benefit from when they come in mutual aid and they provide backup services to us, or vice versa, because they have more people trained. We're not leaving our community going out to them as much. So it really is a good relationship having that grant as well. So that's kind of a recap on some of the grants that have happened within the last 3 to 4 months. All of this equipment, excluding the LED sign, all of the vehicles, everything on there, all the SCBAs, that has been on our capital improvements plan for the last 3 years. So that kind of made it that much more rewarding, knowing that we were kind of checking those boxes for the brush truck, the SCBA, the air cylinders that come with it. We're really looking at those alternative funding sources, other than looking at having to find it through other means. Just like any grant, before we write any grant, we always talk with the mayor and her financial team to make sure that everyone's on board with this, they understand it, and understand that all of these grants require a 5% match.
Mhm.
So right now I'm in a holding pattern. It's my understanding that the match will come out of free cash, so I can't place the order for a brush truck until all the money has been appropriated before I can sign a contract.
Yep.
So if the city's gonna use the 5% from free cash, and for any reason free cash wouldn't be certified this year, will be certified next year, are we gonna lose any of those grants because of it, or?
No, so a couple things. The good thing is these grants I just outlined for you, excluding the SAFER grant for the 4 new people is a 3-year grant. All the other ones have a 2-year scope of service. So that buys it, usually they're 1 year, these are all 2 years, so it buys us an additional year. The negative to that is 2 things. Number 1, just like everything that the world is facing, is the costs are increasing. And particularly, just like anything, most companies will raise their prices after January. And then the other component, the bigger one, is with the brush truck. I don't think the brush truck will be that much of a concern, but typically right now, by the time you place the order to the time you take delivery, for an ambulance, I can tell you it's like 18 months to 2 years. A brush truck isn't that very detailed, like an engine or an ambulance. So I think they'd be able to turn it around in about 12 months. But my point is, as we're in a holding pattern, that timeline for the scope of service for the grant is moving forward. And you have to take delivery of all that equipment and vehicles by the end of that grant period of performance. So, so we're watching. I'm not too concerned about it. Like I said, with the brush truck, those are pretty cookie cutter, and it's not that, there's not that many intricacies that they need to do with a brush truck. So we'll just monitor that and watch the grant timelines, but we're not going to lose anything. So.
Anything else in that section? Okay.
And then the last thing I have, just to keep everyone up to speed, we're very proud. One of our goals 3 years ago was to really have that community presence from fire and EMS, and get out there and do a lot of public outreach education. And the personnel have been phenomenal getting out there and doing these programs. When you look at the car seats, we received a grant for 50 free car seats. Car seats right now, the ones we have, are $250 a piece. They are not cheap, and there's a lot of families that need this resource. And we have 3 technicians on site over there right now. We have 1 more going to class, so we'll have 4 technicians. Over the last month, I can share with you, we've checked and installed over 25 seats already. We're looking to continually publicize and give these free car seats out there, but it's a great value and resource to the community. Fire extinguisher training, we've got 6 classes already scheduled for this month based on the request and demand out there. People are loving those. The SAFE program in the schools, Kyle Gagnon is doing a phenomenal job now that schools are back in session, working with the school staff and getting our people in there. We recently did the fire truck ride to school, and that was a huge hit, and the kids really enjoyed that. The senior SAFE program, next week, I think I have a bullet on here a little bit further down. Next week, we're working with the Council on Aging to go out and install. They have a list of 44 homes that need house numbers. So we're going out there next Friday and doing the install on those house numbers. CPR classes, last year, from January to June, we did a CPR class for the schools every month, and also 1 community class. Captain Matt Sandler is working with Amanda Judd, who's the nurse at the high school right now, and trying to schedule those classes to get people now trained at the high school as well as community CPR classes. Deputy Benson's going up to the Lathrop community next week to do a second presentation at their request. The Easthampton neighbors, they reached out to us looking to do a series of videos. So we did 5 videos. We're actually going to release another one either the end of this week or early next week about smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, fire extinguishers, house numbers, slips and falls, trying to find other avenues to educate the public out there. I talked about house numbers. The community paramedic program, this one we're very proud of. Easthampton Fire and EMS is the only public safety service in this state that has a memorandum of agreement through the Department of Public Health to continue to administer vaccines. Administration of vaccines is not in the scope of practice for paramedics. You have to request this waiver and fill an application and demonstrate why it's important. And that got approved back in early May before the executive order from the governor ended on May 11th for COVID, which gave us kind of an open blanket prior to that.
Mhm.
So now going into this month, we're working with Allison and her staff through the health department. They've been phenomenal. And our paramedics are teaming up with her staff to do 3 clinics just in the month of October. We've got an open house we're going to be publicizing on October 14th for Fire Prevention and Safety Month. Our sharps disposal program is continuing to see about 4 gallons of sharps a month, which on paper may not look like a lot, but it is a ton of sharps that we're collecting from the public through that program we oversee.
Sorry, what's sharps?
Like needles.
Oh, okay.
Needles. So we have a free
Ooh,
program.
sharp.
Yeah, people come here and they put it in there. We properly dispose of those. We're working with John Mason and his staff for Harvest Fest. We're gonna have our ladder truck there. We're gonna do the bonfire with them. That's always a fun time. The kids love that. That will be on Sunday the 8th.
Mhm.
And then the last one I have is with everything else ongoing, we're talking about increasing in revenue. We're talking about grants. Well, the other thing that we kind of layered on top of that was the city ISO rating. So this ISO is the Insurance Service Organization. Every community in this country has a numbered classification for your insurance. It's on a scale of 1 to 10. 1's the best, 10's the worst. And not every homeowner's insurance, but a majority of them will use that number to then gauge what your homeowner's insurance is going to be. So right now, Easthampton on that scale of 1 to 10, back in 2016, they were evaluated and they got a grade of a 5. Excuse me. We went through, we made some changes over the last 3 years to our operations. They look at fire operations, they look at dispatch, and they look at water supply. And I talked to them on the phone today. We should be getting the final version in January, February, but we're looking right now at least a 3 or possibly even a 2.
Nice.
So, excuse me. So that should take a lot of the homeowners' insurance rates and hopefully lessen those as well.
Cool.
Even if we see a reduction in $100, couple $100, anything is to the benefit. We'll take it. And it's really, I really will kind of end with, I think when you look at that ISO rating, I think it's also a reflection when you have a outside agency come in and kind of do that independent review and audit. It's easy for me to sit here and say, hey, we have a great department doing good things. When you have an outside agency like ISO come in and really kind of put some credibility and validate that and have it reflected in savings to the community, I think that says a lot also. And over the past few years, the personnel worked very hard. They've stepped up through COVID. Here we're coming through this cycle again. Hopefully it won't be bad and we'll continue to endure. But that ISO rating is pretty exciting to get that reduced for the community.
Absolutely. And Chief, that is a combination of like response time, time to be on scene, something like
So there's, when they look at the overall grade, there's 3 buckets: the fire side, the dispatch side, and the water side. The fire side is 50% of the grade. The water side is 40%. Dispatch is 10%. And on the fire side, they look at response times, they look at our equipment, they look at our vehicles, they look at our staffing. I'll give you one example. Back in 2016, the city, the fire organization did not have documented, written down automatic aid agreements. So when a fire came in, did mutual aid still occur? Yes, it did. When we came in and we sat down and looked at that 3 years ago, we put a plan in place. So now anytime we get called out for a structure fire, they tone out Easthampton and they automatically tone out Southampton and Northampton immediately. All of those responses count to help lessen that overall number. So now instead of 6 people or 8 people responded, we've got 4 more coming from Northampton and 3 or 4 more coming from Southampton. So those numbers help get you closer to that national standard. So that's just one quick example where we've made some adjustments. We've increased our training. Training is a huge component. Driver training they look at. So as all of you have gotten to know me over 3 years, I'm a huge proponent of training, and that certainly is reflective in this number. And once we get the report, that will be shared out with all counselors as well. And probably at our next quarterly meeting, I can walk people through and explain how the scores and evaluation actually works. So I'll kind of pause right there. I've been talking a lot, but there's been a lot going on and a lot of good things going on.
Yeah, I mean, so there are a number of questions answered along the way. I mean, as always, I really appreciate, and certainly the city appreciates your focus to detail and training and making sure that you have a department that's functioning not only at the highest level of capability, but also advocating for appropriate materials and equipment. So thank you. And I'm assuming also, especially as we look at all the housing projects that are likely occurring in the city and the increase in population that's going to occur. I mean, obviously, I would expect that you're projecting your EMS revenue is just going to keep going up, as well as probably, do you anticipate a need for more staffing with that?
I think right now we're in good shape. We'll bring these people on, we'll let things get settled. I think looking at the plans I've seen in place and some of the forecasting going forward, I think the city's needs to start looking at, and I believe you already have, of the aging population. That's where your medical calls are going to come from. You're always going to get the aging population. You're always going to get a little bump just by the increase in population. But I think with the current population you have, and many of them staying here, that aging population, I think is going to be the bigger bump in your medical calls, not from the bump in population, if that makes sense. So, and then in terms of revenue, again, by holding our rates steady right now, you will see a bump you should see a bump in revenue. But again, I think we all need to have that conscious effort of looking long-term and looking out 3 years and then readjusting the rates. And again, this money, there's 3 buckets of money that this is reflective of. You have the money from your EMS transports, you have your money from the Medicare reimbursement program that I talked about, and you have the money from the Westhampton contract, which this year was renewed for another 3 years, July 1st. And we renegotiated that, so the cost was $25,000 a year. We bumped that up to $35,000 this year. Next year it goes to $37,500, and then year 3 goes to $40,000. And that relationship, that contract, is really a win-win for both communities. And I will say, when you look at the fire EMS grants, I really touted those regional agreements. In terms of the staffing grant, we look at my narratives. I touted that relationship and that contract with Westhampton, and also the one we have with Southampton for mutual aid, which I think was reflected in that award. So.
I have another question, but I want to just circle through the room first to make sure if anyone else has anything. I was thinking a lot this weekend, having attended Porch Fest and looking at the work that the CERT team was doing, and just curious about kind of what the interaction is between the fire department, CERT, and potential training, and if there's any funding that comes from the fire department. I know that they have some equipment that they need, and if there's flow of money to them, or if it comes from other sources.
So what I'll share with you is we have a great relationship with CERT. I'm a huge advocate for that. Coming from a volunteer department that I started in back in my hometown, I don't think it can be underestimated the value that they bring to the community. Captain Jason Dunham is our direct liaison with Steve McGrath, who's the CERT team leader. They do monthly trainings. We help organize and kind of guide them through that. And in terms of utilization, I'll share with you this in terms of, I think this will speak volumes into the value we have with the CERT team. I talked earlier about the run cards for structure fires. If you were to go look at our run card right now in fire dispatch, the CERT team notification is on our run card. So the minute we go to a second alarm and start requesting more resources, without talking to the incident commander, myself, the deputy, it's written in our plan, they immediately call the CERT team. That in itself shows you the value they bring to firing EMS right there. I mentioned the clinics. We're going to be using them for the drive-through flu clinic on October 21st. We're going to be using them to help with that. So yes, the CERT team, incredible resource. Have a large place in my heart for them, coming from the volunteer ranks.
I'm terrible with acronyms. What is it?
The Community Emergency Response Team.
Yes, that.
Yep, they've been around for years now. Right now, I think it's probably fair to say, without having it directly in front of me, there's at least probably 20 active members on there. Steve McGrath is the team leader. Very dedicated group to the community.
I'm certified in my head and I couldn't get it out.
Any, or certs, the breathman. Any other questions for the chief?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you all for your continued support. I hope this is helpful.
It
is.
I always
Very
tell
helpful.
my staff, I never want to get caught off guard, and I try to reciprocate that. I always want to keep people in the loop. It's easy to say our doors are always open. Everyone's busy, and we get that. But please stop over anytime. If you have any questions, stop over, reach out, call me. Come do some ride time with us. I always love to have anyone come do some ride time.
I not only appreciate how much detail you bring here whenever you come for these reports, and I know it's like, it's 6:45 on a
Never a
Tuesday,
problem.
but the lack of hesitancy and the eagerness to come and advocate for your department and show what you're doing is really appreciated.
No, it's going very well. Very proud of my personnel and the staff and what they're doing out there. And I'll end with that and thank you for everything. And if you have any questions, please stop by anytime.
Great.
So
Thank you,
thanks for
Chief.
everything.
Thank you.
Very nice. Okay, next on the agenda, I think I'd like to just offer a few updates. And I invited Councilor Denham here to talk about the resolution against anti-Semitism. As you know, there's been some advocacy and outreach, just talking to some of the congregations within Easthampton to try to feel out their support. There was initial outreach to them a couple times through email, and I think there's just innate challenges in terms of using that as a method to contact those kinds of organizations, and so we're trying to do some more one-on-one. So we did hear back from one congregation that they were not, at least the way it looks now, were not interested in offering their support for this. The outreach will continue, and again, I'm hoping that over the next month or so we can at least conclude that effort and then bring this forward to the city council. A couple things, I think I intended this when we first submitted this, but I would like to include some language in here about basically I'd have to I'll just ask permission from the committee if they agree, but I'd like to include some language about offering recognition for Jewish American History Month. A lot of times when we do these resolutions surrounding culture or cultural or ethnic groups or marginalized groups, usually we try to include language in there about the relevant months of celebration or recognition. So if there's any So I'd like to include some language in there, and I could probably wordsmith that if there's any concerns about that.
No, I don't have any concerns about that. I think that's fine.
And then I had, as I had indicated, we had gotten some interim support letters that came in after the initial submission to the packet, and I shared those with, I think, the committee. Yeah. So
Yep.
did you get a chance?
Yeah.
Did you read those?
Yeah.
I just want to. With your permission, I just wanted to read these because I think it's relevant and helpful in terms of some of the. I mean, it's not a surprise that synagogues and the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts and the ADL are going to support this, but I just wanted to read the two really quickly from the Interfaith Council and another one from an independent clergy person. So, dear Councilor Zaret, we are writing to you on behalf of the Interfaith Council of Greater Springfield to share our heartfelt support of your resolution against anti-Semitism. Formed in 1972, the Interfaith Council is a voluntary association of local clergy, institutional leaders, and community groups from diverse faith traditions in and around Springfield, Massachusetts. Throughout the past 50 years, we have organized ourselves across religious lines, both as a joyful learning endeavor, as expression of mutual protection and solidarity. Our call is to engage with one another as the wider community to ensure a shared sense of safety, value, mutuality, and joy for people of all faiths and none. We are steadfast and united in affirming the democratic right to practice one's religion without fear. We also recognize the urgent necessity to proclaim pluralistic values today and to call out hatred in all forms with renewed urgency and commitment. We applaud not only the sentiments that your resolution conveys, but also the seriousness with which it proposes lasting remedies. Please consider us partners in this work. We offer our encouragement and our support for this resolution for the deep interfaith and community values it expresses. And this is they represent the Spiritual Assembly of Baha'i in Springfield, Cultural College of Our Lady of the Elms, Episcopal Diocese of Western Mass, Islamic Society of Western Massachusetts, the Jewish Federation of Western Mass, Just Faith Ministries, National Conference for Community and Justice, Roman Catholic Diocese of Springfield, Sisters of St. Joseph, Springfield College, Office of Spiritual Life, St. Mark Armenian Apostolic Church, the Unitarian Universalist Society of Greater Springfield, the United Church of Christ, Hamden Association, and the Winding Path Tendai Buddhist Sangha. And then we also received a really nice letter from another Reverend Marissa Brown Ludwig. I'll just abbreviate this, but I'm writing in support of your outstanding resolution on anti-Semitism, the oath that reached with the City Council of Easthampton, Mass. I'm a neighbor living just over into Florence, but I drive through Easthampton every day and shop there regularly. I'd be very proud of Easthampton for passing and working actively to imbibe the sentiments and passion of this resolution. That she goes through some of her CV. I support you in promoting this resolution in Easthampton. I'd be glad to stand beside you and discuss and vote as discussion and vote. Thank you for undertaking this and for advocating to it be claimed to the life and residents and students of Easthampton. So that's really mostly all I have to share, but I obviously wanted to open it up if there were any thoughts or additions or comments. The only other thing I'll say, obviously, is the Jewish high holidays just passed by us. And one of the things that was remarkable as usual, and I can say about this, my experience as a Jewish person growing up, is certainly with the increase of anti-Semitic incidents across the country that kind of prompted me to propose this was the increase, obviously, in incidents of interruption of high holiday services and the number of bomb threats and that were called in, which either delayed or canceled services for Jewish people looking to celebrate or observe the high holidays, as well as then the moreover vandalism and other things that took place around that. Just for me, obviously reinforced the need for commitment, especially in a city like Easthampton, where we have a very, very, very minority Jewish population and not necessarily a lot of awareness of Jewish culture, and so it's just even more important to bring this here and across the Commonwealth. So that's all I have to say. If anyone has any feedback, I certainly welcome it to the committee.
I would just say, have we, because we did, part of this is asking the schools, I mean, it's not a mandate, obviously, but did we hear anything from the schools about what they do already, and if they're interested in supporting this, or so. Just I guess that's a question.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say that was heartened to see was that, at least from my high school student, which is the only insight I have, is that they are announcing it, at least on the high school level, of recognition of holidays. I think that, so initially when this was submitted, I had spoken to a few members of this school committee if they wanted this to somehow either run in parallel or kind of have them affirm this. And that was in the late spring when there were some other activities surrounding the process of our schools. And so I appreciate you bringing that to my attention, because we have a little bit of time. I can certainly circle back with school leadership, both in regard to school committee and administration. As always, with the intention of these things, if we pass them, we bring it forward. But I think, to your point, if we can have collaborative process preceding the passage and feedback, that would be helpful. So
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why I say that is sometimes we do things like this and then the schools find out after.
Yes.
So I think it's good. I think the preceding piece is the key.
Yeah.
So that way, at least they're aware, and it doesn't come as a surprise. Like, oh, we should be doing this, and yeah.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. I will I will reach out tomorrow. I'll send maybe something. I'll figure it out. So.
Okay. Yeah, that was my only question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me push that. Anything else?
Upstairs.
Looking for an AA meeting, is that?
Is that the,
AA?
That's probably our public
Yes.
safety.
Yeah.
That's probably
so,
that's probably.
did they tell you? Did they give you an address?
Yeah, it was a municipal building.
It could be in the basement.
It could
I
be.
checked down there, and the other one might be upstairs, maybe.
I think there's planning board
Oh,
tonight.
Planning board,
planning
that's it.
board.
So that means that the next door
Yeah.
upstairs might be. If you ask the dispatch at the
Public safety complex.
public safety complex, it's
Thank
probably.
you.
I imagine that would be
Mhm.
a place.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Good
Yeah.
luck.
Is this referred to as a municipal building?
Both are municipal.
Yeah, both.
Yeah, so I've seen
Any other
Okay.
feedback?
So I just had some thoughts or whatever. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, the first thing I want to say, I'm really happy and pleased that this is being brought forward. I think that the experience of what Jewish people have experienced in this country and for a long time, but more recently, I think the level of hatred that has come towards minoritized populations is appalling, and so I appreciate the efforts of this resolution to recognize that and also to provide support and affirmation. So I just had a couple of thoughts, and these are just thoughts, and you all get to decide whether or not what you want to do with it, right? Like, the first thing I want to say is I'm really happier with this version of the resolution. I'm not gonna lie, like if this had been presented, and I'll be fully transparent, right? Like if this had been presented and we had to vote on it that particular night, I couldn't have voted on it. Like I couldn't have. I think the particular recognition of a past president in a conversation about white supremacy was really hard to do that. So I just feel like I have to name that, and out of respect to you and members of this community, Jewish members of this community, it would have been really hard to choose, right? And I think underlying that, I think that's how white supremacy is operationalized. White people are put in a position where they have to choose, and they often choose people who look most like them, right? And so I feel like I have to name that, and I want to acknowledge that. And so when I was reading this, and it just made me think that white supremacy has a different the experience of white supremacy is different for different people, right? Like, I think if you look at the history of Black people in this country, white supremacy is and continues to be appalling. And I think that the experience of Jewish people is currently appalling. And at one point, it feels like there was some sort of recognition of acceptance, etc. I think that had to do probably more with freedom of religion, right, than skin color. But I wasn't there at that time historically, and so I'm guessing, right? And so it just made me think when I went down, we got down to the connection of kind of the solidarity piece of with people of color, and I think you list. I don't have my glasses, so I apologize.
I can get to it. I could read. Do you want me to read it?
You don't have to read it, but I just felt like maybe there needs to be something more of the Jewish experience of white supremacy, and that, and particularly after the first iteration, and then that it just felt. Disingenuous is not the right word, but that disconnect was a lot. And then to try to fix that in some way, it just felt, to me, although I agree with solidarity, right? I think there's been a lot of efforts that have been done around anti-racism work and anti-Semitism work and just justice work in general. And so I don't know what that looks like. I'm just throwing that out there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe some sort of acknowledgement of what does white supremacy look like within the context of the Jewish experience. And so I don't know, right? Like I'm just kind of throwing that out there as a thought. And then I got down, and I'm gonna be transparent again. When I saw this bit on call on social media platforms to institute stronger and more significant efforts to measure and address online anti-Semitism, it was a good thing I was sitting down because I almost fell over, because we had an opportunity with our vote with the Teslas to take a stand on that, given the fact that we willingly gave someone money who owns a social media platform. And that was really, it's really angered and frustrated me all over again, that sometimes as public leaders or people in general, we don't see the larger understanding of white supremacy, and that I don't think that we pick and choose when we wear our justice hats. We either wear it or we don't. And I think that this was just a little bit, it doesn't feel like we have credibility to say this, even though I personally agree with it. I just feel like we had a perfect opportunity to do that, and in action and not just words. And so I feel like I need to say that. Which then leads me up to the bit about asking elected officials to sign off on some sort of pledge. I think that, first I'll just say, like, I don't sign pledges. I feel like pledges are opportunities to feel good about something. They're opportunities to pat yourself on the back. And I think for elected officials, I think people use that as an opportunity to gain support or whatever, but they don't actually understand what it means or what it is. And I think that the example of the Teslas, that's a really great example where if I asked all the people in this particular room about, do you support anti-racism or do you support, it's not anti-Semitism, Jewish,
Anti-Semitism?
Anti-squared Semitism, right? Then you would all say yes, but in that moment of actually understanding what that is and education and all of that, I think it's a feel-good opportunity and not necessarily anything else. I think also within the context, if we're talking about Easthampton, which is 92% white, if this is not something that we're saying we offer to every minoritized, or we put this in front of everybody in regards to minoritized experience, I just feel like it's, again, doing for one and not the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as someone, could not put in front of a Black woman and say, here, you have to sign this this pledge. I think about myself in that, like, as a woman, no offense, guys, I deal with sexism a lot in these spaces. And I'm not saying, well, if you don't get it, I don't get it. I just think there's a lack of education and a lack of understanding based on behavior. And so I'm just struggling with that a little bit also.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I need to name that. And then I think the last piece, I think, is the work of the CRC. I'm realizing more and more the lack of resources that the CRC has in order to be successful. And while in theory I appreciate the CRC, for the CRC to do all of these things when they only meet once a month, I think in addition to other things that they're being asked for and whatnot, I don't think they have the capacity to be able to do that. And I was chatting with a member this weekend, and you had mentioned this in the meeting, that the CRC was contacting people and whatnot. I was thinking a lot about the first iteration of this and what an incredibly compromising situation that could have put them in to ask people to support something that was also in conflict with itself in terms of what it was advocating for. I think that puts them in conflict with the work that they do. And I think it undermines their I'll use the word integrity, but you all could use a different word if you wanted to, in terms of kind of what their mission is and what they're trying to accomplish. And so I'm struggling too of like, what is the role of the CRC, because they're so under-resourced, and I don't know that they're equipped to handle some of these things, right? And so I'm just trying to think about what is it that we're asking for and from them, and also like, maybe their role isn't going and advocating for something, but their role is to say, oh, these are the challenges that I see with this, and then going back to whoever has written this to like figure out and work with them whether or not this was inclusive or whatever. And so I'm just thinking about that, and maybe that's also a conversation for the larger staff or somebody, or the mayor, or maybe we need to be thinking about a full-time position that works with those individuals, or that particular committee that is maybe housed in public health, right? I think these are racism, anti-Semitism, all of those. I think they're public health pandemics, right? Like it's horrible, and so I think that we need to be thinking very strategically about that particular committee. I think we've had major missteps with that over the last few years since its incarnation, since it was created, and so I just think we need to tread a little bit lightly. And I just learned that people have stepped away from that, and now it doesn't have quorum anymore. And now we're like, offering up and asking for such a, I think it's a huge ask. I just want to say that. So those are my thoughts. Again, I think it's important. I think it's relative. I support it. I'm very pleased it's in a different place than it was when it was first presented to us. And so that's just kind of my feedback.
Is it possible for, because there was a couple that lost me a little bit. First one specifically. So are we talking about the whereas white supremacists in the United States and in Massachusetts have exploited and continue to exploit bigotry and hate for political gain, targeting marginalized communities, including Jews of all cultural and ethnic backgrounds, as well as blacks, Latinos, Asian Americans?
I think that's where it gets a little bit.
So I'm curious. Can you just elaborate a little bit more what the concern was? Because I'm confused.
Yeah. So I think it was the connection, and again, I think it's from the first iteration of recognition of someone historically.
There was initial language that spoke, and I could there was initial language that talked about George Washington proclaiming something, and which frankly, I just want to provide context, and then to circle to your quote. So some of the language was borrowed from a variety of congressional resolutions on this topic. And that was one, and I mean, frankly, that made me uncomfortable from the start, but it was like, well, they did it, and I guess I kind of see where they're going with it, but when it was, so first of all, if this had, and I never intended for this to be a first reading, because I knew there was going to have to be, refinement, but if you had brought that up, I mean, that's a no-brainer, and it reinforced what the discomfort I was feeling with that. So thank you for reinforcing that, and then so then to go back to that
Yeah, so,
question.
and I don't know, and so I think it's stuck, and it may be not, like, you all may want to say, well, I think it's fine, or reach out to other people who might have perspective on that, but it just made me kind of think of that it's not the same. White supremacy impacts, I think, groups differently. It's all oppressive, right? But how it is viewed or how it is seen plays out differently. And so, and I might be way off base, right? Like, I was just thinking, like, these...
I think you're on base. I'm sorry. Do
Well,
you have more? I want to let you finish. I
Because-
want to let you finish. what
Because
you said.
I feel like we're next to the base, but not on base. Because the way I view it, white supremacists exploit and continue to exploit bigotry and hate for political gain.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't see an issue. I mean, and maybe that's my myopic view, but like white supremacists are actively hating a variety of people, and I don't think it hurts to name some of the people that they're actively hating, because they're actively hating all of these people. So I guess I mean, I feel like if we leave them out, if we don't mention, I feel like we're missing the fact that, well, it's not just anti-Semitism. It's white supremacists are hating LGBTQ plus. They're hating everybody, and I don't find that offensive to say, and I don't think it cheapens or weakens this. I don't. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Sure, yeah.
So-
And like I said, it was just the conflict of those two things that I
Yeah,
was like
absolutely.
struggling with. And I agree. They're not the same in some particular way, right? There's some, and so I just again, it was a struggle. And I'm not saying it has to be changed. I'm naming it for myself.
No, that's helpful. I think.
As the only person of color here, I would say that I don't necessarily disagree with Connie. I don't disagree with that sentence either.
Right.
Because I got your point. Maybe we can just resolve it as maybe using more language, like white supremacists, definitely using the language. These happen in different ways to different group of people. You're just adding maybe something else there, but definitely the white supremacists abuse different groups different ways.
Mhm.
And I see that there, but
I mean, so here's why
I grew up in a colony who is being abused since 1897 from the United States. So
no, I get that, but
and-
here's what
and it's totally different from the LGBT community.
oh, totally.
So,
course.
but at the end we're being both abused,
Mhm.
but in
Yeah.
different ways.
Yeah, but I would I mean we're you know what honestly, at this point we're slicing hairs, but really what I'm saying is white supremacists will go around and graffiti hateful stuff against every group, right? They'll go around and they might attack you, they might beat you up to every group, right? What I'm saying is the people's lived experiences. Well, colonialism is very different than white supremacy in Massachusetts today, where you have hate groups meeting to disrupt protests and whatnot. Like that's different. Those are apples and oranges, right? So I guess my feeling is, and it's just I'm annoyed that I'm having this conversation in my own head because it feels like there's not really a whole lot of places for it to go, but hate and the expression of hate manifests to so many different groups in so many similar ways. Now, that lived experience is going to be different, right? For those people interpreting it for themselves. Just like if I was a person of color and you were a person of color and two things happen to us, we're going to have two different experiences, right? And it might be for the same reason, but those lived experiences will be different. So, I'm finding a really hard time figuring out how we say this differently, to address that. I don't know if that exists. I don't know. I mean, am I completely in?
No, I got your point.
Yeah, I just don't.
I understand you.
Because I feel like saying that white supremacists are targeting all these people, like including Muslims and Hindu, because I'm thinking back to 9/11. It's like when Muslims were being targeted. I'm thinking to Asian.
You happen
right?
to be Japanese.
I'm thinking of Asian. During COVID, like the Asian. People were being randomly attacked. There was graffiti. There was vandalism to people that owned. And I'm seeing these things that are consistently similar modes of operation that white supremacists use to intimidate and cause fear that are not all that different.
Mhm.
I mean, does that make sense? Because I don't know if I'm making sense, but
I mean, so let me tell you my thought, and you can tell me if we're thinking the same thing, because I think we are. And I might have actually had this in a very early version before I presented to the council, but the basis of all of white supremacy is a white, cisgender, heteronormative, patriarchal, cultural hegemonic, uni-religion, nationalistic base. And then anything that's different than that is targeted. Now, I think that, and I think I had some language around that, but I think that for me, the language we landed on kind of names many, maybe not all, if there's any left out.
Verbal attacks and incitement and violence.
Yeah, I think it's implicit that because of these are different groups, that it is experienced differently because they're different groups. But I mean, if I have to think about
resolved today.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just.
I hear what you're saying.
And again, I don't have a big issue with the language, but I got your point.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not attached, right? Like I feel like I have to name it because.
Yeah.
And I also missed the first. I somehow missed the George Washington thing, so it sounds like
I took it out pretty quickly. That came out
set
pretty
a foundation for something.
Yeah, that came out pretty quickly. Yeah.
But like as I read this strikes me as being inclusive and naming what and I, honestly, if you want to change it, that's fine. But this just seemed like it wasn't out of whack to me.
Mhm.
It seemed relatively.
Yeah, I think it's
Reasonable.
inclusive, and the only point I'm making is, I think it impacts groups differently.
Oh,
Absolutely,
definitely.
100%.
Repressive.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
colonialism,
Yeah.
imperialism, right? Like, all, I think that people just have had historically on this
Mhm.
land
Mhm.
going, and taking, indigenous lives as well, right? Like, I think that they've had land stolen from them, right? And their lands, except their lands taken from them, right? In terms of, like, you think about colonialism and the exploitation of, right? And I think it's just a very different experience. And so, and again, it was just because
Yeah,
First
totally.
generation,
Yeah, it was a
and
little
then
kind of,
it made me stop and think, like,
self-contradictory.
this is
Or-
very-
Well, I'll say this, is that this is the latest facet of anti-racism that the Easthampton City Council has carved out of inside of it. And so each one of those, so prior to this, I mean, we had the discussion around Indigenous Peoples Day, we had Juneteenth, we had the discussion around the Massachusetts flag, which in and of itself is deconstructing racism. We had the resolution about autonomy for Puerto Rico. We had a lot of LGBTQ and trans-specific stuff. We had, to some degree, the wage theft ordinance, which focused on the importance of diversity. We had a proposal for equity around cannabis. So the answer to your request is yes, and I think our work is not finished, and each of these resolutions we propose that attacks racism and white supremacy and it from a different angle implies exactly what you're saying, and I think it's the synthesis and the culmination of the language from all of those that gets to the heart of how everyone experiences it differently. And I think that's why it's important to continue to do these. And I think by continuing to do those, that's the expression of the individualism of different minoritized groups. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, it was just, I think I leave this to this committee. Again, it was just more my.
Yeah, let me think if there's a way to.
And I don't want to make it heady.
Well, right. Well, that was the
I
thing
think
too.
the last thing we need is like
Parse that out
big
further.
words like hegemony and like
Some of my favorite
people be like,
words.
what?
But there were some stuff. So yeah, let me keep that in the back of my mind. See if there's a way to kind of like incorporate and respect that. I will also say that the including Jews of all culture and ethnic backgrounds. The whole, I mean, this is a broader discussion, and I don't necessarily mean to open it up, but the concept of Jews as white is very complicated,
Mm-hmm.
and not all Jews are
No.
have white skin, and if we had a group of white supremacists sitting in this room right now, and they knew I was a Jew, they wouldn't see me as white.
Right.
And so and I'm not. That's all. I don't even.
Right,
that's
that's
a very very thing. That's a conversation I'd love to have right now. Not right now, but yeah.
Sure.
But I also want to respect the fact that there are Jews of color and in multiple ways, and so
Well, all
anyhow.
over the world.
In
All over, there's Jewish people of the Jewish faith all over the world.
yeah.
Many different.
I didn't realize they were all over the world, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna. Can we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Can we? Is there just a way to the social media platforms?
Oh.
Because the
Oh right. Yeah.
the one
sorry.
before that is calling on elected officials, and maybe you could just say to use their influence or something like that to condemn anti-Semitism. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's implied.
It, but
Well, I mean, I think it's implied. I mean, we can maybe list all the different ways, but yeah, I guess it's implied these days that if you're condemning all manifestations,
Yeah.
that includes social media. So,
but that
yeah, I mean, I
let's
think
forward
that
that one to you.
sure. Let me figure out maybe if there's ways to. I think all manifestations is all manifestations. So.
Again, I just thought it was ironic because you had a perfect opportunity to
Yeah.
say something and we didn't, and then it's like, oh, now we're gonna say something. It's like,
No, I know.
But that's a slippery. I mean, I'll be honest with you. That's a slippery slope. Like we also, passed a fuel efficiency ordinance. So does that mean that none of us can drive gas-powered cars? Like, that's a slippery slope. And sometimes you have to, you take each vote as it is, and you make each decision as it is, and you don't necessarily hang on to those things. And to say, well, I can't vote on this resolution because I voted on this 5 years ago or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm just naming the fact that
Sure.
sometimes we pick and choose.
Well, that's,
when you're
we
talking-
always pick and choose.
But when you're talking about justice, right? I think it's.
I will tell you that when you brought that up, it has sat with me, and I've tried to reconcile exactly how. I know we're going off course a little bit, but I mean, what you said about that it wasn't ignored, if that makes any sense. I'm just trying to Councilor Derby's point. I'm trying to reconcile. I drive a Ford.
Henry Ford was the biggest anti-Semite in the universe.
Right, and I don't, but Mercedes, BMW,
Right.
they all fueled the Nazi. I don't know. It's a much bigger conversation.
And then if you widen that net, it becomes impossible to function because,
But
it's a tough place. You have to pick and choose because otherwise you'll go crazy.
But I do respect your stance and your integrity around that issue because it's a tough ball of wax I don't know what to. Regarding the pledge, I agree in general that these things could be just lip service. I think that they're lip service for some, and for others they're a toolkit. And I think that it's a tangible thing too to ask people to do these things. I think you don't have to. I think the things with resolutions is that a lot of times they don't mean anything. I intend, if we pass this, to circle around and to try to ask that we're honoring and respecting this.
Right.
Just as since we passed the Indigenous Peoples Day resolution, I will tell you in the background that I have been trying to follow up on some meaningful way that we observe it. And I know that's not the topic now, but when we do these things, I think we all want them to have meaning and substance and be enacted.
Sure.
I think that, I haven't looked at this specific pledge in a while. I think, again, it's just another tool in the toolbox. And I think with many things with government, it's what you do with it. You have people who show up, who are elected officials who show up to meetings and they're just there to be seen as an elected official.
Yeah.
And you have people who get elected and they walk the walk. And so
Can we?
I don't.
For that, instead, so because, I must have just zoned out because I saw a hyperlink, so I was like, oh, that's something I'll look at later. But because it does say, be it further resolved that Easthampton elected officials and community leaders sign on to the pledge. So
Encouraged to.
I think encouraged
Sure.
would be more appropriate,
Mhm.
so people don't feel compelled.
Yeah, because we don't have to do anything.
Right.
Right.
So
have someone
I
do-
think that could potentially. How does that feel, Connie?
Yeah, that's fine. And I think that what you just said there is compelled. They don't have to, right? I try really hard. To live my pledge, right? What I don't want is people say, "Oh, well, I signed off on that. I'm really proud of myself."
Yeah.
And look what I did,
Right.
And then the next day, I hear them saying make some nasty
Right.
comment, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Mhm.
but there's just that disconnect, and so I want people to be accountable. I try to make myself accountable, right?
Mhm.
And so that's just, and I think if that's the case, and that's the language you want to use, and I also I wouldn't want to be the person asking someone else to do that,
Mhm.
right? I think that's.
Yeah, I think encourage solves that. And that's
Yeah,
one
I
thing.
think encourage.
One of the many things I admire about you is that you're a person of principle and integrity, and that you're not here to be in that first group that I labeled that, I'm an elected official. Look at me. I got my blue ribbon on. Like you're here to do the work and walk the walk. And I think that's one of the which is awesome. So thank you.
I do think if we move on to the community relations committee, I do agree with Connie that this might be kind of a big ask. So I think it would be great for them to review it and to maybe.
Sadly, we don't have a CRC.
Right.
We don't have enough members.
Right, we don't have enough members. So but didn't we increase the numbers?
Yeah, but we have
two of them.
two people now.
Okay, so but keep what they're keeping it in here, I guess. Just having them be CC'd on it so they can consider it when they have a quorum. If there's any ways that they could contribute or be helpful or something like that. Like I think maybe all of these things might be a little ambitious since we don't have a quorum.
I wish the city had the resources to be able to do that,
Yeah.
right? But I'm just like, when I saw that, I was like, damn.
I think, and my intention, just to be clear, is like because one of the conversations I had.
Particularly after this weekend when I'm interrupting, but after I found out people were sorry.
Yeah. I think that I think that one of the prior conversations I had with them was like, we want stuff to do, and so like. This is something you can do. It doesn't mean you have to do it. And if they're shorter resources, like obviously shouldn't, and like they prioritize or deprioritize, I think that maybe there might be a way to word this in a way that doesn't make it seem as not required, but like.
I mean, it almost seems like a mandate.
Like not mandated, but also. Maybe also add and other city resources, just like similar to when we're talking about ordinances, like or their designee. Like the community relations committee is the most identifiable resource within the city to do stuff like this. But like, the mayor's office potentially has a role through proclamations and recognition, and like so. Maybe if I name them, if they're named because they are a resource, but we add other language that implies that it's not just on them and or that it's a wish list.
Yeah.
It's not like,
I'm like, go move that boulder. It a lot.
So maybe if I do something like that, do you think that would be?
I think that would be good. But I do think this is a bit of an ask at this point.
Well, yeah, I think
so. Like figuring out how to make it seem less like a mandate, more like here's a list of things that could be potentially used by any, whether it's the schools, whether it's the mayor's office, whether it's individuals. These are things that could potentially, or the CRC.
And again, instead of requesting action points, maybe encouraging or soliciting. Okay.
Garnering feedback and.
Let me.
I think then it becomes more of a community effort and not this group is responsible now for, and I'm thinking about who on there can put on a anti-racist or a anti-Semitism workshop, right? And yes, they could go. They might have some funds that they could get from the mayor, but then at the same time, it's vetting who are you going to go with, and like they don't have. And they're a volunteer group, right, as well. So.
It also could be, encouraging, since we have letters of support. It could be encouraging the CRC to host, right, or it could be encouraging the city to host. Different congregations that could potentially fulfill these roles, but are more prepared and able to do it in a meaningful way.
Yeah, maybe if we just say like the CRC and other other municipal and community stakeholders.
There you go.
Is that?
I think that would, and then soften the language about action points. Sounds a little like, all right, I need a bulleted list by noon on Tuesday.
Oh, well, I was going to put in parentheses like a deadline. Requested by January 22nd.
By January 22nd, yes.
Yeah. All right, well, that's,
No, and I think that, at least for, appreciate Connie bringing that up because because I didn't, as I read that, those things didn't, stand out to me, so I think that's good, and I think it'll make it better.
No, this is helpful, and I think that I mean, there's always a fine line when you write these things, like between like suggestion versus trying to put, because it is just a resolution.
Yeah,
People
it's
can be
right.
like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
But actually, that stuff is nice. But yeah. So I mean, again, it goes back to the pledge thing. It's about following up. It's about like, we did this, like, you know. So
Yeah, I
those,
just wanna
that's
be
all helpful.
consistent. Yeah, I just want to be consistent.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's all. I think everything you had to say was incredibly valuable, and I mean that's the best thing about about this body is that you have all this input, and so thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good.
So
So it doesn't sound like we're in a rush on this. So
no, I mean I really want to hopefully have a church that from Easthampton, but so there is no rush though.
Yeah.
But
well, and if you've done outreach, maybe they should hear a different voice. Maybe I'll reach out.
yeah, I mean that's why. Yeah, like I said, so a member of the CRC had a conversation with one of our congregations who I don't want, but I think there's a couple congregations in Easthampton that I think, based on what I know about them, probably would support this. But
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay. Cool.
Is there a reason why you want a church?
Oh, it's only it's only because whoever it is. I mean, it's just that I'm not aware of. I reached out to someone from the Baha'i community, and they were basically like,
I mean, is there a reason why you're going for a spiritual or religious
Oh.
group?
It's like
No.
collegiality.
Well,
Or-
I think both, right? So cultural groups,
Well, because that's why I'm curious. Because my concern when I hear you say church, in some ways I feel like that reinforces people's stereotypes of Jews, and not as a cultural
Mhm,
group, but it reinforces it as a religious group.
mhm, mhm.
And I think that I get the resolution, right? But I think in some ways the effort to it reinforces people's stereotypes and misunderstandings of Jewish people
Yeah.
as a culture group, as a
I think it's a complicated intersection.
sure.
So, but I also think that in general, whether it be Jews or people of color, or I was going to say Muslims, but I'm trying to think of a really good example. The LGBTQ community, our churches and synagogues and mosques are just general cultural gathering spots where.
Yeah, I get it.
So that's kind of more, but I yeah.
I'm
But-
just saying maybe it's not just.
Yes.
I mean, the way
Yeah,
it made sense
like
to
the
me.
Kiwanis Club.
The way it made sense to me was that there was, historically, persecution levied from the church towards
Sure.
Jews, which then this would become a gesture of good faith and reconciliation, maybe. I mean, that's kind of the way I was thinking of it. I don't know if that is,
It's part of it. I mean, to Councilor Denham's point, like, should I reach out to like the Rotary Club and stuff like that? Like,
I mean, I'd be more intentional than the Rotary Club, but and no disrespect to the Rotary Club, right? Like,
just as an example.
Yeah.
right.
Just
Like,
might not be
I mean, I
relevant.
think that if you're talking culture, if you're talking faith, if you're talking, whatever, I would just think to expand.
It's a point well taken. Yeah, maybe
I
let me look
don't
at.
want to narrow.
Well-
that.
Well, there's a Kiwanis Club that's trying to start up in Easthampton, which I'm a member of. So
Oh, there you
I'll
go.
reach out to them, or like,
About the Freemasons.
yeah, I don't know if we don't have a temple here anymore, but certainly
My grandfather was a Grand Master.
nice. Well, a lot of their symbolism is based in
Yeah.
the compass and the square is basically a part of the Star of David. But anyways,
Anyway,
It's a whole other-
that's true. Yeah, because I have his. He has like a whole thing.
well, and there's other.
Here.
Well, I don't want to give away any Masonic secrets,
Yeah.
but
No.
well, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me work on a few things. I want to synthesize and digest this.
Sounds good.
I give you late. I apologize.
No, this was really wonderful. I really value and all your recommendations, and I think it's just going to make this better.
I think so too.
Really quickly, the Vadnais-Ketty intersection, that will be striped soonish.
Yeah.
And there's some other topics that have come up out of that, which I discussed with the city council president that we're going to be working on.
Okay.
There's no city ordinance around commercial vehicles parked for extended periods of time. So just so people know, there was a semi-trailer parked there for like 2 weeks in a row who lives nearby but isn't necessarily a resident of the street, and that caused issues both in terms of visibility and safety at that intersection, but also that I guess there's a bus stop there for the schools.
Oh, jeez.
So that's a conversation to have. Some other folks also had reached out about the Union Street project and visibility of crosswalks, and I spoke with the DPW director, and he's going to ask the contractor to just try to pay more attention to that.
I noticed that last night.
Yeah. So
Nobody, like where the crosswalk were, nobody's stopping anymore.
No.
So, because they're half covered up at least.
Just this out here is a disaster. Like this yellow and
Oh,
red.
Yeah.
Like we were here
right
at
now
the
it's
red
not working.
here, and that there was a whole line at the yellow to go that way, and
Oh, wow.
people on this side
Yeah,
were
it happens
just
in the weekend,
speeding
too.
through red light.
Why?
Red light.
Because they're
red light.
working on it.
So it's
Yeah.
down while they're working. I mean, that should be a priority. It feels like that should be a
or
priority.
how
they're
about
working on
yeah,
Wow.
that's a tricky one.
Coming this way,
Yeah.
it's yellow and it's red everywhere
Exactly.
else.
Oh.
And people aren't understanding what
Yeah.
to do, and then this line right here, or this line, like when we were sitting there, it was just like 4 cars, and they were like
Yeah.
speeding through because they didn't want to stop, so they
Right.
just kind of followed each other through, and it was just,
Mhm.
and then people here were, the woman was nervous, she didn't know what to do, people were like honking at her to go, people were speeding through the thing, it was unfortunately we went that way, but it was a mess.
How do they not have temporary lights?
Or an officer
Or
something,
somebody.
or-
What they should do is make it a
CCL.
4-way stop, but what's
Yeah.
confusing is 1 is yellow and
Yeah.
3
Yeah,
are
like-
red, and
Yeah.
you can't
Okay, right now
see
you
that
can
it's
see that
yellow.
one is yellow and the other one.
Well, and I think to
Yeah.
your point, like I got there and I was like, I didn't know which ones were red and which ones were
Yeah.
yellow. So I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm dealing with
Right.
here.
And so if they're gonna do that, they should make them all red,
hmm
and then it's a 4-way
Yes,
stop.
everybody stop. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you can ask.
We'll have to figure that one out.
Okay, well, I
If
guess
you want to
I,
reach him tomorrow, I will do it for him.
But
You wanna do it, or
it
you
was
wanna do it?
dangerous. It was crazy.
well, this was great.
Great.
So thank you.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.